All right, welcome back to the Writers Guild podcast. It's me, Belton Tisdale, and Kason Wysong. That's it.
Calling in from a car. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just gonna go ahead and dive right into it, man. My question actually comes from a coworker of mine. Not like he was asking us to ask a question, but he just asked me this question at work one day. And I really, really liked it. I thought it was a really interesting question. So I'm going to throw it at your lap and see what you have to say about it. The question is, and I want to do this in two phases. So starting off just with like books, of all the books you've read,
Mm.
what is the villain that you think was the most evil? And oh, your face falling. The most evil villain
Oh,
you read in a book and why?
you're gonna love our topic. Oh my
Wait,
gosh.
really?
Oh, yeah. That's amazing. Um, okay, let me think. So, first off, everyone, we are in this phase of our podcast where I am calling in from our car. So, we're in the startup phase.
Woo!
Um, yes, so excuse the background. It looks like I'm in a space shuttle. Also buying myself some time to think. There's different categories of evil, right? I think to be
Well,
the most evil.
Well, I'll put it this way.
Okay,
One that
go
you
for it.
found the most offensive, maybe like, let's say, like angered you the most personally. Like, I guess the way I would put
Mhm.
it, I would specify the question is like, what is a villain in a novel that you personally found the most offensive and infuriating? Like, they got to you. Like, I can't stand what they're doing. They are so horrible. Like, on a personal level. Like, I wouldn't, consider like Darth Vader a good answer because like statistically, Darth Vader killed lots of people, so like that makes him pretty bad. But
Right.
but that's it, you know.
Um,
And I don't think a
well, I
statistic
do
answer
think
is interesting.
the categories of evil are important to think through here because there is Darth Vader, for example. There's like overall, I think there needs to be deliberation. There needs to be significant damage beyond like emotional or mental. I think there needs to be a physical manifestation of the damage caused, right? So there are villains that can play the psychological game, but at the end of the day, it's all in your head. So I tend to think that, hey, unless like I have a cut on my arm, isn't actually a cut on my arm. And so villains have to inflict some level of damage and there has to be deliberation behind it. And so, and then I think you need to consider scale, right?
Yeah,
The personal we can argue that hey, there are the villains who stab in the back. The villains in my books, the books are really centered around betrayal, and there is backstabbing. So what's powerful about that is that I think it is emotionally triggering to like a reader. They start to empathize with the main character, and the main character is betrayed, and you kind of feel like you're
yeah.
the one who stabbed in the back. So there's a power there. But I also think of Stalin's quote where
Oh, good.
a single death is a tragedy, uh, many deaths are a statistic, or a million deaths are a statistic, or whatever the quote is. But
That's cold.
every single one of those deaths, there is a life that was extinguished because of it. And so I don't want to just dismiss that. So as I'm thinking through this, um, I would not say Palpatine because I think he,
Oh
to an
well,
extent,
I want to know specifically first. I would like to know in broader like media pop culture second, but first I want to know as far as like a novel is concerned, a book you've read
oh, a
first,
novel.
and
Oh,
then
oh,
and then
oh.
pop
I
culture,
got
and then I'll give my answer on it. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no, you're good. This is all just buying me time.
Oh, it
I
is.
would say Sauron is probably
Uh oh.
an early twist
Oh, I'm
and
sorry. I'm sorry,
ravage the
Kason. Could
land.
you had technical difficulties just then. You kind of bugged out there a moment. Could you start your question from the top? I know I heard you say Sauron, but could you just like start that thought from the beginning? Because like it kind of glitched out. There was some.
Ooh. Yeah, Absolutely. My poor connection from the car, but
It's okay.
I would say Sauron just because his soul intent, like I think he's the quintessential evil, right? He's the fallen angel who wants to ravage the land. His sole intent is to kill, steal, and destroy, and to extinguish the light. And so it's kind of hard to argue with him not being the ultimate villain. The just the brutality of it. So he would be the, I would say, probably the foremost and easy answer, though I would caveat and say that villains who inflict indignities, but not necessarily death, are, in my opinion, a little more insidious and repelling.
Yeah.
So if there's a villain who maybe has some kind of level of essay on a character, or, you know, crosses that line and physically degrades or strips away the dignity of someone, to me that's all more disgusting almost than the kill. There was this one book, and I'm just trying to recall the name of it. I'm really struggling. I know it was whoever wrote A Thief of Swords, I think is the title, and he had this villain, and this scene was essentially to juxtapose a magic user versus a non-magic user. And the scene was meant, like, they were fighting in an arena, and it was just to show the absurdity of it. And
Yeah.
it went to levels of nastiness that I still like think about.
Ooh.
I'll give some examples, right? So causing the non-magic user, just casually causing him to strip off all his clothes. This is again like an elven lord, like strip off all his clothes, dance around naked, and pretend like he's all these different animals. And then he starts to eat himself. And it's just this grotesque and like humiliating level of savagery. And so it was one individual, but I just think it was such a deliberate destruction of that person. It was kind of like, oh, like I just is still
It's like
even
super
thinking about it.
personal.
It's just, yeah, exactly. So, those are a couple of examples. I'm sure there's a plethora that I'm missing and could be up there. But what about you?
So I'm gonna you listed a lot of really great points in evaluating what gives a villain a sense of kick. I disagree with the scale point.
Okay, I
mean,
love it. I
not
knew
to
you
say,
would. Let's go.
well, not to say that's not a factor. I mean, and really, you were just listing it. I just don't think that scale really has any merit at all. And because, like, I'll use an example. Like, think of The Force Awakens, that part where the super ultra, what is it, Star Killer base fires off its multi-planet killer laser. It doesn't just blow up one planet; it blows up it blows up an entire system, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
this is, as far as the Star Wars universe is concerned, this is like unmatched level of death. I mean, Stalin is like feeling embarrassed and envious in that moment, and no sense of impact in terms of like how it might have impacted us as viewers, because, dude, we've seen this before. It's just derivative. That's all it was. It was a very safe move on J.J. Abrams' part. He could do better. Boo. And I mean, there's just no sense of emotional impact because, like, you don't know anybody on the planet. You just see some people on a balcony going like, "Ooh, what's that?" There's no point. And you can never realistically like take the time to humanize all the victims in that. I mean, that would make for a very long movie with horrible pacing. But yeah, I just think scale does. I really think that the personal aspect really matters. If there is going to be violence, because like you get a lot of PG-13 movies, right? Where there's lots of violence, or even in books too, since that's more what we talk about technically, where there's a lot of violence, but it's depicted in a very kind of clean, safe way. Like, you just don't really get any details. Like, I think of the Hulkbuster fight scene in Age of Ultron,
Mm-hmm.
and it's mass carnage, and you see like 0 people get caught up in that fight between the Hulk and the Hulkbuster, which is laughable, but it's PG-13, so they're not going to show you, a family running away and they getting crushed in the mayhem. But point being, that didn't really, affect the tone of the scene. It didn't really feel dark. It was just a fun action scene, which is what it was meant to be, and that's good. But that's my point in how like a villain's action might be colored. If there's violence involved, I think if you show more of like the actual impact that it'll have on somebody, like you were talking about that magic scene where the guy began to eat himself, and you talked about how brutal it was. I think that went a long way to really convey that. Dude, I know you read Under the Dome, which I would love to talk about in a future episode. There's that one scene where the main bad guy is in a bunker or whatever it was, a shelter, and there's like one guy with him, and he's like he's like calculating through his head. He's like, okay, how do I survive this as long as possible? And he's like, well, I'm not going to let this guy be here and breathe air with me and eat food. So he stabs him to death. That was a pretty simple sentence I just stated. He stabbed him to death. But the way Stephen King described it was very visceral, and it actually like kind of sickened me. So I was very disturbed and disgusted by that villain because I really got a sense of the brutality of his act of violence. All that being said, I really think something more personal that the villain does goes a long way for me. I really like one villain in the first book in the Farseer trilogy. That's a book I mentioned in our last episode, or that's a trilogy I mentioned in our last episode. That's the Assassin's Apprentice. There's this character named Galen. I might be pronouncing his name wrong. I don't know. It's a fake name, so can I really pronounce it wrong? But anyway, that villain just by default hates the protagonist, Fitz Chivalry. He hates Fitz. And you come to find out toward the end of the book that he's hypocritical, for one thing. I don't want to get into details because spoilers, but he's hypocritical and he's just extremely malicious. And the lengths he goes to spite the main character, I find that was very effective depiction of a villain. I wouldn't say that's like my pick for the most ruthless villain I've ever seen in a book. I'm actually going to go back to Under the Dome for my official novel answer, and then I'll give you my pop culture answer. And these are, I know, going to be unusual answers, but that's just how I see it, or at least how I felt it. And Under the Dome, there's that scene where there's a lady with her dog, and she's being antagonized by some of the young men that have taken up the role as unofficial police in the area. And they're just a bunch of punks harassing her, and they've got guns. And her dog goes to defend her, and the dog gets shot. And I remember being so angry, I had to set the book down. I couldn't handle it. And it was the way it was told. And again, it was a little more personal. It was somebody's dog, like a dog's loyal. The dog was just trying to protect his owner. And like, man, that got me. I remember being really upset about that. As far as pop culture is concerned, did you ever watch the show Chuck?
No, never seen it.
Well, okay, the villain. Should I just go into spoilers? Because I feel like I can't really like say things without saying spoilers. The show's been around a long time, but the ending, the show, it's a goofy spy parody. It's very silly. The tone is very light throughout. The stakes are very low. Every once in a while somebody dies, but it's very dramatic and played up. And it's not the kind of thing that really makes you go, oh no, because it's just a goofy show. But at the very end, the threat is not to the characters' lives. It's specifically to the main character's wife's memories. And in turn, their relationship. And this villain does that to spite the main character. Like, you've hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. And he does that by taking away, and I forget how he does that, but, it's a side point.
Question, and it's a little bit semantics, but what was the original question? Was who the most ruthless villain is?
Yeah, I didn't really think through like my exact wording that much.
Okay, because I wasn't thinking in terms of like who's the most well-written villain, because I would agree with you then that you need that personal element just in terms of like ruthlessness and like raw destruction is more so where I was going
I
or
got
where
you.
I was thinking,
So I
where the
don't
scale
remember really
matters.
how I worded it when I articulated it to you.
Fair
All I
enough.
wrote on
Yeah.
my notes was just evil. And I guess when
Evil.
I
Well,
think,
yeah, and evil
yeah, I guess when
broadly.
I think of like something that's really evil, I think of that calloused ability to just wound somebody on a personal level, as opposed to something that's detached. I just find that I'm not even gonna say that's like objectively like the most evil thing. I just find that to be a way in which evil really comes through on the page to me,
Well,
or
and from a
through a
written
screen.
and right reading or like consumption of media, I would agree with you. You need that personal element. Otherwise, it doesn't hit. It's like The Force Awakens. So I think that was a perfect example of how scale doesn't matter if there isn't that
Yeah.
personal
Anyway, I
connection.
apologize if I didn't like word that question with too
No,
much.
no, you're good.
Yeah.
I just felt like I had to clarify because then other villains pop into my head, like, oh, the friend in the Count of Monte Cristo who steals his wife and his child and his life, and different ones like that, where it's those pop into my head as well. There's a lot of good villains out there. I feel like I'm contradicting myself. There's a lot of good villains, but
Yeah, I got you.
you know what I mean.
No, I understand. Yeah.
So that I feel like is a great segue. That was the perfect question. Honestly, we got a 1-2 punch here because the
Sick.
topic for today
Oh.
was modern day soft villains. And my question to
Oh.
you is why nowadays, and by nowadays I'd say within the last, let's say 2025 to 2015, it seems like Hollywood writers, authors cannot write a pure evil villain. It seems like they've always got to justify his actions, provide some kind of backstory or nurture story of why he is the way that he is. And they always kind of want to, it's almost like the anti-hero meets the anti-villain, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's my question to you, is your take on the modern villain and any thoughts you have around it being like the soft villain. And feel free to disagree with me.
Oh, well, I mean, I've thought about this a lot. I think the answer stems from two sources. I think it's both a trend in writing, just like people are really fixated on certain world building styles and techniques these days. Like you'll watch a number of shows that have come out around the same time, and you see that they kind of have the same style of world building, or like you realize, oh, this is kind of like something that's trending. And I think the same thing has happened with villains for the last several years. I think that's something that's really been like heralded, at least on the biggest scale, as far as I know. The MCU movies, you had the villain, I forget his name, in the Black Panther, who was like a sympathetic villain that, the kind of villain where like he had a point, and then everyone
Right.
finds that compelling. Or you got like Thanos and he had an argument for what he was doing, which is interesting because when we see Thanos again in
Killmonger.
Endgame, they
Yeah.
doubled down on the villainy of his characterization. They went from like giving him a rhyme and a reason that people argued for on the internet, which I find strange, versus him just being like, I'm going to wipe out the entire universe. And everyone will be like, you can't do, nope, that's so bad. It's going to blow your armor off, dude. And we'll all be gone. But so I think culturally, a lot of people have just become really sympathetic to wrongdoing, and like our society for some reason has this odd compassion for people that do evil and then want to justify it. Even on a small level, I've seen people like had an interaction with somebody that was really rude working somewhere, and I thought they weren't professional, and I complained to a friend about it, and they said, oh, well, they have to be there every day and do that, and wouldn't that wear down on you? And I thought, it's good to have compassion and empathy and all that. That's nice, but they worked there and they weren't being professional, and I think it's okay to say that's wrong. And I think that was kind of weird to sympathize with them, but not with me from having a negative experience through that person exercising poor professionalism.
For sure.
You see
You know
that?
what?
What's up?
Well, and on that point, I think a mistake a lot of people make, and I heard this from a podcaster recently, is that they assume that if the author, the writer can
Mhm.
make them feel sympathy with the character. Therefore, the actions of said character aren't necessarily all that evil. Like there's an explanation, there's a reason, and they start to kind of justify it if they feel sympathy of some kind.
And I just,
And I think that's a mistake.
yeah, I agree with you that I disagree with that because,
Hmm.
you know, in real life, I'm a firm believer that at its best, art imitates life. I think we should always use reality as a baseline for fiction. And in real life, no one thinks of themselves as the villain. They always feel justified in whatever position they're in. So that's always going to be true that there's some rhyme or reason behind what a person does in real life, but bad is still bad. But yeah, like our culture sympathizes a lot of times with wrongdoing, and which I find very strange. And then secondly, I think it's just been a trend in writing as of late to make sympathetic villains, and I agree with you
Yeah.
that that kind of makes for some weak writing for those villains. Um, yeah, I think it's kind of a silly perspective that our society has that's resulting in some poor writing. I think villains should be villains. However, they shouldn't be the mustache twirling. Like you brought up the Count of Monte Cristo, and I at least the movie I watched, the one that has Henry Cavill in it, that released in like what
Oh
90
yeah.
in the 1990s. I saw
The
that version of the
teenager.
movie
Yeah.
or the story, and it's a good movie. But like at least how the movie depicts the villain, and I mean the actor's great, but like it's a mustache twirling villain where he's just stereotypically evil. Like he just does evil for evil's sake. Whereas I find a more compelling villain to be one that, yeah, they do evil, but like they're motivated by something human. It's not right. It's not a proper motivation. It never would be if it results in evil, but they have a human motivation. It can be as simple as wanting to save face, or it could just be good old fashioned greed. But like in that movie, The Count of Monte Cristo, the villain is just sort of
Oh,
blah.
that,
I'm
that's a
mean.
that's a that's I all right. I disagree with that example because
Okay, yeah.
he essentially wanted to steal what Edmond Dantes had, which was, his oh man, I'm blanking on her name, but like his betrothed, his wife.
A hot girl.
And yeah, exactly, which I think's a pretty powerful. I mean, isn't it greed and lust and there's just there those are pretty powerful motivators. I don't think we can discount that. So
Yeah, but then when he
as
gets her, he doesn't even care for her. He's just sort of like, blah, out of my face, you suck. And it's like,
right, because
you
his assumption
wanted
is he
her.
controls her at that point.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I don't feel like I have enough of a footing on this story to really talk about it. I only watched the movie the one time.
Hmm.
So that's probably why you have a stronger stance there.
Well, I
Probably
think
have a
what
better
you're saying
perspective.
though speaks to why there is kind of this trend of writers and people who are writing these backstories for villains or these reasons why the villains are doing what they're doing.
Hmm.
I guess my only pushback on any of that would be that some are overdoing it and it's okay to have a villain purely motivated by evil. Like Sauron, I brought up earlier. I think he's a good example of a villain that's just evil, right?
Yeah,
Like he's pretty
but in his
base.
case, he's a force. Like he's not even embodied outside of the tower in the case of the movies.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a little more vague in the books. It's been a long time since I read those. But like he's a force of nature. I think that's awesome for a villain. Like he can be pure evil if he's just a force. Like humanizing a force kind of strikes me as a little odd. Like why would you even need to? So the way he's depicted there, I think, is more than appropriate, very powerful and effective, and awesome in the right ways. Yeah, he should 100% be evil. But I guess, when we're talking about fiction, there's all kinds of possibilities, right? I guess I'm naturally defaulting to thinking of like humans being evil. And I guess I always analyze fiction through the lens of reality. I actually have a hard time analyzing fiction through in-universe logic. Like I'll use an
Understand.
example that
Yeah.
I know will escape you, but I'll clarify enough details for you to get it. There's an now I'm to be clear to any of our fans out there of the Writers Guild podcast. I'm not a weeb, okay? But there are like two animes that I enjoyed. One of them is Dragon Ball Z, and the other was Attack on Titan.
Avatar.
Now,
Oh, never.
well, Avatar is American, so no, sir. It's just a
Oh,
good
okay,
old
not
cartoon,
any-
and those are we get a pass on those. Those are awesome. But Avatar is like the best. Good call out. But in Attack on Titan, the main character is depicted as like super violent and hyper vengeful and just crazy. And I always thought of him as like just another stereotypical anime character who's just sort of, crazy was how I thought of it. I criticized his character through the lens of the genre from which he came. And other people analyze his character with in-universe logic. Toward the end of the story, he basically goes totally crazy and enacts a bunch of carnage. And the story goes from him being the protagonist, but he rapidly shifts from protagonist to anti-hero to just full-on evil force of nature that needs to be stopped at the very end. And I didn't think anything of it. I just thought this is crazy anime, just, scaling up the tension to insanity. But I watched a video where somebody explained, hey, his character, it's natural that his character developed into the ultimate villain of the story because he was always super violent. And then they pointed out these scenes at the beginning of the series that I thought were just examples of like crazy over the top anime. And so I was like, in that example, I was blind to the main character's characterization because of how I allowed the genre to color my perception of the story. Because I was thinking of it in terms of, this reality as opposed to the in-universe logic, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess when I think of villains, I can't help but just like draw from like how I think of evil with humans. Even though we can have like a flaming eyeball on a tower that defies humanization, like that's. But yeah, we're talking about soft villains.
But why don't we talk about? I think it'd be really interesting to bring up because your book doesn't really. I mean, it's got. I mean, I read it a while ago, so I'm not exactly sure how it's evolved. But you don't necessarily have like one villain character, I would say, right? I mean, maybe the cult leader, or maybe Kronos, who is now not Kronos, a different name, but like, like you don't necessarily have like a Darth Vader in your story, right? So
that's the thing is I added Darth Vader to my book. I found a way to do that without getting sued.
What?
No. Okay, so there are like two characters in the story that are full on antagonists. Like one is
also real quick.
Yes.
Just because we're out there, like we are very honest people. I'm calling in from my car. Do you want to use like actual names from the book, or like are you trying to keep those kind of on the DL?
Oh, you can use names. I don't know why that would be a problem because it's not like, I mean, if I was like, nobody knows who we are, or at least nobody knows who I am.
Yeah.
You've got books
My
published.
mom's gonna watch this show, so
yeah.
Well, then I'm gonna say it, Nashida.
Oh man, I don't know if I care about names being dropped or not. I've never really thought about that. Like I fed chapters of my book to AI to have it analyze and give me feedback. And I know there's people we know in our writing circle that would just freak out at the idea of that. Yeah. I just think to myself, no one's out there like combing through, like I can't get people to read drafts.
Are we on YouTube yet? Hold on. Are we on YouTube?
Are we? We're not live. No, we're just recording. I'm going to upload
When
tomorrow.
Does YouTube pick us up? Oh, okay. You upload. All right, perfect.
I'm gonna upload tomorrow, and it'll go live, or at least it'll go public at 6 p.m. on Sunday. I'm just gonna keep it the same time. So I'm committing to that time and day. But yeah, anyway, my thought was just like, technically I am sharing this information with this AI, and there's no telling from my limited technical perspective where this is going. But like, I can't even get people to read my drafts. Like there's no way there's no one's going out there and going like, whoa, I found this thing. I'm going to make it mine and profit off of it. That just seems like light years worth of paranoia, for lack of a better way of putting it. Anyway, I don't think I care about using names. They're just names.
I think most people too, like we're both writers. Like, so we have a level of ego to where I mean, it's like, hey, if I hear an idea from Joe Schmo or whoever, it's
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to steal that idea because I believe I've got great ideas. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's
Like,
ultimately my thought when it comes to stealing ideas. Not that
yeah,
again, not to reiterate, that is absolutely not a concern of mine. I'm just not worried about that. Um,
yeah, me neither.
I just don't
Don't,
think.
but don't steal my ideas, people. Don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it, or I'll be upset. Yeah, but like, I just don't. I just don't. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
You
Ultimately, I
don't think
think
there's
that when
any
it comes to
issue with,
ideas, it's the
oh,
execution that makes
no.
them good. So even if somebody
Mhm.
did steal my ideas, they would have to make it
Amen.
better first, at which point I would say touche. But anyone that's stealing ideas is not in the business of trying to come up with original ideas, which is necessary for creating good content. Like
Agree. Wow.
comedians that steal other comedians' jokes, it's like you have robbed yourself of the necessary
Hmm.
requirement to spend time brainstorming another joke, which is how you get good at making jokes. Like I joked around with people in college all the time, and I was good at making people in college laugh. These days, I don't really do that. And guess what? I'm not as good at it. I was reading something I wrote back in college and I thought, wow, that was really fun and clever. But anyway, all that being said, I'm okay with using names. The only name you used just then was the only name that I've actually like made up that actually involves any creativity. All the others are just names that exist. And I think
Oh, whoops.
for
Was that the name I
clarity's,
should not
oh
have?
yeah, because I think for the sake of clarity, I think names are necessary. All that being said, what were we talking about?
With
You
Kronos.
asked me a question. You asked me a question about. Okay. I was
Let's
telling you
do
what kind of villains I have
villains.
in my
Yeah.
repertoire. Okay.
And then I will need to wrap this up because it's getting dark out.
Yeah, dude. Okay. So, all right. So there are two villains that are full on antagonists. Like there is, the Nashida, which is like a force of nature with like a humanized element, but like human in the sense that he like talks to people and he takes on a form, but he's meant to be like a force of nature. And then there is basically like a cult leader that follows
So it's still the
along.
two.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're both like just full on villains. I like to think that Nashida is a more interesting villain than just like pure evil, but I'm probably just kind of indulging myself there because of some circumstances with how his character operates. But whatever. That being said, all the human characters, I really like the Michael Crichton Jurassic Park approach, is how I think of it, where it's just like here's a cast of characters, and they range anywhere from like, genuinely like virtuous over here to just like in the middle is the majority, which are just like people that I have tried to craft like very human motivations for. They're driven by natural goals. They have flaws. They have fears, and that's what shapes them. And some of it results in good or bad actions. Like they want to do the right thing, but then they lose their temper, stuff like that. And then you've
Yeah.
got people that are very twisted. They have a bad background. Bad stuff's happened to them, and they're just kind of twisted up inside, and they're not good news. And that's not a very common character. But even
Hmm.
then, like try to humanize their villainy. Like there is a motivation of some kind that's relatable. Um, but I think it's more important than instead of like gauging like a cast of characters based on like their moral code is just to have a cast of characters, at least if you want to make them quote unquote realistic, which ultimately
Right.
depends on your skill as a writer. Um, I think it's most important to just like you have these cast of characters and you decide how flawed they're going to be and what are their motivations and fears, right?
Mhm.
And that'll be a good way to do that. So yeah, I like a broadcast of characters
Well,
with
and
varying levels of virtuousness.
yeah, perfect. And I think motivations, right? Like that's something I didn't necessarily think about when I was writing my trilogy, but it's so important. Like that's back to basics. That's writing 101. You need motivations, I'd say, for villains and heroes. I mean, that's what drives them to do what they do. So as you're writing your story, just be thinking through, sorry, I'm not talking to you, by the way, but like to
No,
our
I
moms
need
or
to think about
whoever's
this.
listening
I
to
need to
this.
be reminded.
Yeah, is why are they doing what they're doing, and would they do what they're doing given their ultimate motivation?
Yeah.
So, all very important to think through.
Oh yeah. Soft. Excuse me.
All right.
Soft villains. Are you wanting to wrap it up now,
I think that's a pretty good spot, right?
dude? Okay.
Any
All right.
other closing thoughts?
Soft villains. It can be interesting, but if it's just what everyone's doing, I think it's always better to avoid the trends. Not for the sake of avoiding trends, because not to bring Star Wars back into it, but we all know that how Ryan Johnson's attempt at creating a Star Wars movie, your eyes just rolled in the back of your head.
That's a topic. That's a topic for one of these.
Subverting for subversion's sake is no bueno. However, I think it's very good practice to avoid trends, not again for the sake of subversion. But I think it's important, just like a comedian copying another comedian's joke. Just doing the inversion of the other comedian's joke isn't going to cut it either. You really got to just sit down and just think up your own ideas, like what comes to you. And I mean, obviously you got to take inspiration from stuff you've read. I mean, ultimately, good artists copy and great artists steal. So that kind of, contradicts what I was just saying about copying other ideas. My story is like a Frankenstein's monster of all these different sources of pop culture media and obscure pieces of media that I really loved growing up. And it just kind of became this conglomeration. So, you got to take inspiration to craft what you want. But I think it is important as a rule of thumb to avoid what everyone's doing. So I think the ultimate flaw with the soft villain, he had a point archetype, is that it's a trend. And so usually when we see it, we're seeing it in its worst form because we're seeing it with the least amount of work put into it to make it work. It's just, they have an argument, they give a little speech, and then the audience goes, huh. And it becomes formulaic. And ultimately formulaic is what we really despise. I think that's really what's a problem. I can tell you, like,
That's a trope. I feel like
yes.
would be a
well,
good
I'll give an
topic.
example. I think the worst because it gets pretty rough after a while, but one of the worst episodes of The Office, the American one, is the first episode. And you know why? It's because it is an exact remake of the first episode from the British show that it was copying. They didn't make a new episode. They just did a carbon copy of the original. I don't know how closely it resembles the original because I never watched the British version because it's just not my speed. The Office isn't really as much my speed either. I'm more of a Community guy. But anyway, The Office is good.
Love both.
Yeah. But that being said, the first episode of The Office, it feels, when you watch it, you can feel it, man, without even knowing the background. It feels really, really dry and dull and, above all, uninspired. And you see the same. They did a remake of, what is that? What is it? Psych? No, I forget the name of, what's the name? Is that the name of the movie? The Alfred Hitchcock movie, The Shower, and my mom. I don't remember the name of the movie.
No idea.
I think it might be like, it's not Psych. That's a totally different show. But anyway, that movie that I cannot remember the name of, both of us are like, duh.
Wait, with the hatchet in the door? Or
No, that's The Shining. It's like black and white Alfred Hitchcock movie. There's a young man who's Bates Motel, something like that. He's crazy about his mom. She's dead. A lady takes a shower and he stabs her. Aren't you feeling warm and fuzzy? Anyway, they did a remake of that movie a few years back. Like, that's an old school movie. Again, Alfred Hitchcock. Mm-hmm. And they did a remake a few years back, and they were boasting about it being a shot-for-shot remake. And that sounds cool. I think that sounds cool. Like, they're preserving the heart and soul of the original while bringing it to a modern audience. Ooh. But the result was a really dull and uninspired movie because it was just copying. It was, by design, formulaic. It was just following the steps of the original
remakes
movie.
are so tough. Like I think they're so tough to
Well,
make.
this
Or excuse me,
specifically
to
was
nail.
not so much a
Yeah,
remake; it was a carbon copy. It was a
it's
shot
just
for shot
carbon
remake.
copy and paste.
Yeah, because you get
Hmm.
remakes that do work. I mean, they can screw up. Like the Pink Panther, Steve Martin, he's great, but like he couldn't hold a candle to the original Inspector Clouseau. So yeah, carbon copies are bad news, man. Shot for shot remakes, no thanks. You got to do your own thing. So ultimately, I know I'm repeating myself, but ultimately, I think that's the key problem with a soft villain is that it's a trend that people are following,
Yeah.
and people are tired of it. They want to see something different. So yeah, man. But that concludes
Good.
episode 2. Yeah, I think that was
Let's
good. I felt good about that
go.
one. All right,
Is it
man.
recording off?
Yeah, I'm still recording. I can turn it off now. And
Oh.
okay, and we're done.